After Shadow and Bone's promising first season, I was optimistic that season 2 would see the show reach new heights. There are moments throughout the season where the show is at its best, not only meeting my expectations, but surpassing them. However, the season as a whole is not able to live up to the high standard, as there are storylines that feel rushed, inconsequential, and just sloppily put together. There were a number of times over the course of the season where I would be invested in a storyline only for the show to either end it prematurely or cut away to something that was not nearly as compelling. It's only natural in a show like Shadow and Bone, with multiple different perspectives ongoing at the same time, that any given viewer will be drawn into a specific storyline more than others. What is unfortunate though is that not all of the storylines feel like they are of the same quality. It gives the season a feeling of unevenness, making it seem like a bunch of small, fragmented stories rather than one larger narrative. The two main groups that we focus on are the Crows and Alina's crew. Each of these groups experience two separate storylines. The Crows have the Ketterdam arc and the Shu Han arc, while Alina's crew has the Sea Whip arc and the Firebird arc. Over the course of the video, I will be looking at each of these arcs in depth. Spoiler warning for Shadow and Bone Season 2.
This is war, with Pekka Rollins, the king of the barrel.
The barrel doesn't belong to kings. It belongs to bastards.
The Crows return to Ketterdam, and the story that follows is easily the best part of the season. Most of the fully realized and interesting characters on the show are members of the Crows. We get to explore new depths to characters like Kaz, Jesper, and Inej, while introducing newcomer Wylan and integrating Nina into our lovable band of rogues. One of my biggest complaints about season 1 of the show was the Matthias-Nina storyline, and I am happy to say that Nina's inclusion with the Crows did a ton to endear her to me. Matthias, well, we'll get to him later. As the Crows return to their old stomping ground, they are taken by surprise as they find out that the Crow Club is under new management and that they are wanted for murder. This development felt like a natural jumping point from where we left off in Ketterdam in the first season. By yoinking the Million Kruger job from under the nose of Pekka Rollins, they angered him. The actions he took were a response as he tries to signal to all that Pekka Rollins is not someone you cross. It feels like the natural consequences of their actions and does a great job of immediately setting up the arc and gives it stakes.
Way to up the stakes.
Inej manages to slip away while Kaz and Jesper are taken prisoner. I get that pulling a Batman is kind of Inej's shtick, but sometimes it can feel a little goofy when characters are looking right where she is supposed to be, but because the camera isn't directly on her, her disappearing is supposed to be believable. You're telling me not a single one of these dudes was keeping an eye on her? It's not a big deal, but it's a little silly. Before they can be taken to Hellgate, Kaz and Jesper are whisked off to see Dreesen, the guy who hired them to capture Alina in season 1. Except actually it wasn't Dreesen, he was just a middleman. The real person who hired them was the privateer Stormhond, who is actually Prince Nikolai of Ravka. None of this makes any sense and is very clearly a retcon. Why would Nikolai pay the Crows to capture Alina and bring her to Ketterdam when the people they were kidnapping her from were part of his family? Even though the Lantsovs were not very good people, they were still trying to use Alina for the same thing that Nikolai wants, destroying the Fold. So yeah, Nikolai secretly being the person who hired the Crows doesn't check out. And I think this was only done so that he knows who they are and can send them on the Shu Han arc.
And he would suggest that our mutual friends in Ketterdam might be the perfect crew for the job.
With those tiny gripes out of the way, the Ketterdam arc is incredible the rest of the way. Watching the gang war unfold between the Crows and Pekka is a real treat. We get to see how Pekka conducts his business, stacking the deck in his favor so that his desired outcome is all but guaranteed. A ruthless businessman willing to destroy anyone who challenges his status as king of the barrel.
And if this gutter rat wants to play barrel boss, I think it's time we give him proper consideration.
It's great as we get to see the Crows fight back, clearly outmanned and outgunned. We get glimpses into Kaz's backstory, revealing where his hatred for Pekka comes from and the reason he is willing to risk everything to get the best of him. Having been scammed by Pekka in the past, Kaz and his brother ended up on the streets, so when the fire pox hit Ketterdam, their deaths were all but guaranteed. Kaz somehow managed to survive, but the experience left him traumatized, and so much of his character was shaped by this experience. It's no holds bar, as Kaz blows up the Crow Club, as he would rather it be destroyed than be in the hands of Pekka Rollins. His actions seem unhinged, even to his crew.
Blowing up the Crow Club.
Makes you wonder what else he's willing to destroy.
The Crow's dynamics are really interesting during this time, as they start to question Kaz and wonder if he is taking things too far. They don't know his history with Pekka because he refuses to tell them, leaving them in the dark with the feeling that their lives are being gambled with. When Jesper and Wylan learn that Pekka has a son, they agree not to tell Kaz out of fear of what he might do. I think these group dynamics are really interesting, and have the audience asking how far is Kaz willing to go, and how far are the Crows willing to follow him down his dark path.
You know, Inej took some serious damage. The novice nearly lost his head, then the Heartrender took a bullet. But no worries, as long as you're on top of Pekka's corporate holdings.
In the skirmishes that precede Kaz's grand plan, every member of the Crows is given a moment to shine. Each encounter was compelling and allowed us to see the Crows in different situations. Before reaching the climax of this arc, there is an ominous feeling surrounding the Crows. As they go to enact Kaz's plan, they don't know how things are going to turn out, and as a result, we get some great character interactions. The plan itself, and the ultimate confrontation between Kaz and Pekka, is easily the season's greatest moment. The Crows were sent out with a contaminant that mimicked the firepox, and they sprayed it in every one of Pekka's establishments. Such an outbreak would ruin Pekka's reputation and credibility. While this is going on, Kaz has been brought before Pekka. This scene is exceptional, as the balance of power slowly shifts from Pekka to Kaz as everything is revealed. It starts out with Pekka beating Kaz and telling him how he is going to make an example out of him.
After I beat you, I'm gonna hang your body on a post. As a reminder to anyone who forgets that I'm king of this city.
Then, when Pekka learns of the plague Kaz has unleashed, Pekka is done playing games. He is thoroughly pissed and ready to kill Kaz. But before he does, Kaz drops his next bombshell. He has Pekka's son.
Albie.
Now, for Kaz's plan to work, it's a good thing that Pekka actually cares about his son and isn't a deadbeat dad, otherwise things might have played out a little differently. But Pekka does care about his son, and Kaz takes full advantage of this as he dangles his son's whereabouts over Pekka's head.
I buried him. 6 feet deep. He went into that box so easily.
We get to the crux of these characters' past history, as Kaz tells Pekka that he will tell him where his son is if Pekka can remember the name of Kaz's late brother. Pekka can't remember, because of course he can't. To him, Kaz and his brother were chumps that got. But now that his son's life is on the line, he desperately tries to remember, but still ultimately fails. At the end of his rope, he begs for his son's life. And Kaz really milks this moment.
I'm begging you.
Are you?
As he has Pekka literally fall to his knees and beg in front of all of his men, showing them that he has been bested, that he is no longer the top dog, and that he has submitted to the bastard of the barrel. This entire scene is amazing, and Freddie Carter does an absolutely outstanding job, his performance heightening the already fantastic writing. You feel Kaz's life's worth of hatred, anger, and pain all directed towards Pekka, coming out for everyone to see. After Pekka admits to the murders and signs over Inej, Kaz tells Pekka his son was buried in the cemetery. Maybe this is a little dark, but I kind of wish that Kaz actually did bury Albie, and that instead of using temporary firepox, he used the real thing. Now, obviously, doing these things would turn him into an anti-hero, if not an out-and-out villain. But I just think it would be really interesting to see him go as far as everyone feared that he would. I think this could have really worked, especially if the Ketterdam arc was allowed to marinate over the course of a full season, instead of 4 episodes. I think it also shows to Pekka moving forward that Kaz isn't as ruthless as he thought, and wouldn't actually kill his innocent child. I really think the Ketterdam arc should have been a season-long arc, as it feels like it had to fast forward to a conclusion so that the Crows could go on a random side quest. Also, even though Pekka is banished to jail, it is clear that he is going to continue to be a big bad in future seasons. Maybe it's just me, but it kind of feels hard to take Pekka seriously after he was so thoroughly dunked on by Kaz. They're trying to build him back up as this scary, powerful villain, but it doesn't have the same effect as it did before. Also, some of the routes they are doing this feel a little ham-fisted, like having him be in charge of the prison like before he was even arrested. Speaking of Hellgate, that is where Matthias has been banished for the entirety of the season. His scenes are boring, but that is mostly because he is literally given nothing to do except brood and have naughty thoughts about Nina. It's funny in how some of the advertisements they bill him as the sixth crow.
We are the crows.
Famously, there are 6 of us.
But he has yet to meet any of them except for Nina, and has been banished to the Shadow Realm all season.
How am I supposed to simply accept that this is my fate?
Really feels like they were treading water with his character, especially in the last episode when Nina comes back with a pardon, and the guards are just like, nope. It's like, what? That's not how this works. But overall, the Ketterdam storyline is the best season 2 of Shadow and Bone has to offer, and if anything, it feels hampered by having to share the limelight. Showrunner Eric Heiserer has mentioned the possibility of a Crows spin-off series, and I think that would be a tremendous benefit to the characters and future storylines.
We cannot leave without the blade.
Yes, the future of Ravka and my payments depend on it. I'm aware.
After how great the first half of the season was for the Crows, I can't help but be disappointed in the Shu Han storyline. Whereas the Ketterdam storyline was a story about the Crows, the Shu Han arc is the Crows as side characters in Alina's story. Everything in the first 4 episodes was so personal for the Crows, and the back half of the season is little more than a fetch quest for them. This was seemingly inevitable after seeing an interview with the showrunner Eric Heiserer, where he says that one of his biggest notes from Netflix is that they wanted the Crows to show up during the climax of Alina's story. I think this crossover worked well in the first season because their entire story was based around Alina and capturing her, whereas in the second season, they're doing their own thing until they are told by Netflix to drop what they're doing and pop on over the fold. It just felt like such a side quest that it was hard to get invested in it in the same way that I was able to with the Ketterdam story. There are still some good character beats like Jesper coming to terms with being a Durast, but it largely lacked anything to really sink your teeth into. The majority of their big heist has them knocked out to Dreamland, where Jesper hangs out with his mom, Kaz takes a bath, and Inej has some naughty thoughts. The show ultimately gets what they want with the Crows showing up at the last minute to save the day. Each crow gets a bit of a hero moment, which is cool, but I can't help but think it feels a little hollow. Also, the whole purpose of their quest was to get a super sword to battle the Darkling smoke monsters, but it doesn't really turn the tide of the battle to the point where I feel it was a necessary quest. Also, in an attempt to make Inej look cool, they employ some really janky looking wire work. I honestly don't have much to say about the Shu Han arc because I don't feel like there's all that much there. It feels like an unnecessary filler plot that's main purpose is to get the Crows in place for some hero shots in the finale.
Your tracker wouldn't say why, but of all the islands, he believes the Sea Whip is here. You want to explain that?
No.
The Sea Whip arc has a pretty bad start, as the Elena and Mal moments in the first episode are some of the worst the season has to offer. It also doesn't help that Elena and Mal feel like flat characters that aren't really all that interesting. With bland leads, this storyline is fighting a bit of an uphill battle from the start. What I did appreciate is that the show wastes no time in establishing that Elena and Mal's relationship has taken the next step towards romantic love. It was very clear from the first season that these two had feelings for each other and were going to be in a relationship, so I'm glad that the show didn't dance around it all season long.
It's like a little love story.
Does the Elena Mal love story work for me? It works well enough, given the characters' history together. I'm able to buy into it, even if I'm not super invested in it or either of them as characters. At the end of the last season, Elena and Mal left Ravka, with no one knowing where they were going, save for the Crows. So naturally, when they are effectively on the other side of the world, the Ravkan military shows up. Why are they in Navia Zem? And how did they know to look for the Sun Summoner there? No idea, and I don't think the show knows either. They're just trying to get a cool chase sequence. Also, when Mal is recognized by his former commanding officer, he pulls out the goofiest made you look.
Dubrov.
He tricks his CO by saying Dubrov, the guy who died in the first season. Seems silly to me. While Mal and Alina are trying to escape the First Army, they are seemingly cornered. Then, the citizenry of Navia Zem block the First Army and proceed to stare at Alina for an uncomfortably long time. I just think this scene is framed so weirdly, because the First Army don't do anything at all when their path is blocked. I would expect them to try and push through or something, but they seem so content to just chill. Another just weirdly goofy scene in my opinion. After escaping their pursuers, they manage to wiggle their way onto a boat, where we meet the real star of the Alina storyline, Sturmhond, aka Nikolai.
Now you're speaking my language.
Nikolai brings a level of charisma to this storyline that is much needed, especially as a contrast to the dullness of Mal and Alina. He is immediately compelling as the swashbuckling pirate, privateer, Sturmhond. He is cunning, adventurous, and has a love for inventing things. Just look at his toy rack. But as the season goes on and his Sturmhond facade is uncovered, we see that he has a lot more depth to him as Prince Nikolai of Ravka. His free-spirited nature as Sturmhond is countered by the responsibilities that are weighing down on Nikolai. Responsibilities that Nikolai takes seriously despite his fun-loving personality. Over the course of the season, he steps up in a big way, and I think his arc over the course of the season and getting to know his character is one of the best parts of the Alina storylines. As Melina and their new friend set out on search for the Sea Whip, we get to check in with the Darkling. Unfortunately, I don't think the Darkling is given much to do this season. After emerging from the fold and freeing some Grisha, he spends the majority of his time brooding, moping, being a sad emo boy. Even though he is the main villain of the season, it feels like he is already defeated. When last season ended with him escaping the fold, still alive and with some new smoky friends by his side, I thought that he was going to be a force to be reckoned with in the second season. But outside of a few moments, he really isn't, as he is essentially dying from the Murzost in his body. Also, I just have to say that in hindsight, his plan from last season makes him look incredibly short-sighted. When he comes out of the fold to find Grisha being mistreated again, he's surprised.
This again. Locking us up in cages.
It's like, dude, you carved the Grisha out a pretty cushy spot before you went all supervillain. This is kinda your fault. One of the few things the Darkling has going for him during the Sea Whip arc is his connection with Alina, something that persists into the Firebird storyline. It is a result of the bit of Stag's residue that is still in his hand. I usually like these astral projection Bond-like plot points as it allows characters that are far away geographically to still share scenes together. I think it is used pretty well here as both the Darkling and Alina try to understand this connection. It gives us some cool moments in the Firebird arc, so I will talk more about it when we get there. The Darkling is recruiting a team of his own, consisting of some randoms, Jenya and David. I think the costuming for the show is usually pretty good, but this Water Grisha's hair and makeup look bad. They've made her look so silly that I was amazed to find out that it was the same actress that played Rhea Royce in House of the Dragon. As far as Jenya and David go, they might as well be randoms, because I really don't feel like we know much about these characters. David seemed pretty pro-Darkling last season, so why the sudden change of heart? The Darkling is not doing anything worse than he did the season before, so what was the breaking point? Also, when Jenya leaves the Darkling's room and is freaked out, maybe don't do that right outside his door? If he sees you, he might mess up your face. But yeah, I just felt like there was a bit of a disconnect from David and Jenya last season to this one. Mal is able to pinpoint the location of the Sea Whip. I wonder how he did that. But no matter, because the actual hunting of the Sea Whip is so underwhelming that it barely feels like a footnote in the season. There's all of 2 scenes of them hunting the beast, and the Sea Whip gets 2 seconds of screen time before it dies. It all just felt extremely rushed, and like they didn't care to take their time with it because we need to get on to the Firebird. Obviously, once Alina has it embedded in her as an amplifier, it's not going to be enough to destroy the fold. They end up crash landing and being found by the First Army, where Nikolai makes his reveal, leaving the audience to wonder, does he always just wear his prince getup under his pirate clothes? Or what? Overall, I think the Sea Whip arc feels very rushed and is guilty of some poor writing decisions.
We are the cursed progeny of a madman, and you, Malian Oretsev, are the Firebird.
As Malina continue to look for the Firebird, we get to delve into some Ravkan politics as Nikolai tries to help the effort to destroy the fold in ways that only a prince can. He proposes an engagement to Alina as a means of getting the backing of his family and the Ravkan people fully behind her. After she comes by in the middle of the night to tell him yes, the two go public. Adding a layer of political intrigue is always a nice addition, and I think the show does a decent job with it here. Also, one of my favorite little asides throughout the season is Mal being in complete denial that the Darkling is alive. After seeing the Volcrum launch on him at the end of last season, Mal is convinced the Darkling is dead.
Kerrigan is dead. I saw the Volker take him once first.
And he is not willing to listen to anything to the contrary. It's funny how there will be irrefutable evidence that the Darkling is back, and Mal will be like, nope, saw him die.
There's no way he survived the fall.
It's only when we get to the end of the season when he finally acknowledges the Darkling is still alive.
I almost feel bad for what I have to do now.
He's back.
As we get to meet the Lantsovs, we are introduced to Nikolai's brother Vasily, who doesn't really amount to much, but is a villain for an episode. Despite being a general creeper, Vasily doesn't really do anything meaningful for the story except die, so that Nikolai can be named king. However, he is part of one of the most random nothing burgers of a subplot when he has Mal captured and taken away. During the Darkling's attack at the engagement party, Mal is absent because of this, and then just kind of shows back up an episode later. What was the point of this? Was Mal's actor not available for a few days and they had to write this in? I honestly don't see any point to it, and it matters even less when Vasily is torn in half. The Darkling's attack at the engagement party is actually pretty good. It's a big action set piece that feels like the first meaningful thing the Darkling has done all season. There's also some good interactions between him and Alina as he tries to pull her away from the destruction. The connection between them is explored not long after, as Alina is dead set on breaking the bond. She does have a moment where she acknowledges that in some way she does still care about the Darkling, which I think adds an interesting dimension to their relationship.
He was the first person to show me that I wasn't just some weak stick from Karamzin. So much of what I have done and who I am is because of him.
However, it's not enough to stop her from trying to break the connection. She is almost successful, but is rebuffed. Finding the Firebird becomes the #1 priority for the squad, and so Melina and Bagra go off to find Moritzova's workshop. It's here that it is revealed that Mal is the final Horcrux, amplifier, and needs to be killed in order for the fold to be destroyed. In theory, I like this. The signs hinting to Mal being the Firebird were planted along the way, so that when it is revealed, the audience is nodding along saying, yeah, that makes sense.
How is it that you found the stag and the sea whip, but can't find the Firebird? How is it that you walked past other orphanages until you found the one that felt like home? The one where the Sun Summoner lived?
I'm also a sucker for when a hero has to sacrifice themselves in order to achieve their mission. It's even more emotional given the circumstance that the person they are closest to has to be the one to kill them. In theory, this is a beautiful twist that sets us up for a heart-wrenching finale. Unfortunately, in this instance, it was just fine for me, and that mostly hinges on the fact that I don't really care all that much about Mal. Mal's okay, I guess, but he's kind of like buttered toast. I'll eat it, sure, but I'm never seeking it out. I think this illustrates one of Shadow and Bone's greatest flaws, which is that the two lead characters, Alina and Mal, are two of the least interesting. The Alina-Darkling bond comes into play once again, as the Darkling pops up and is very angry. He drops a cold line, something he was famous for in the first season.
Fight me as long as you're able. You'll find I have more practice with eternity.
As he tries to subdue Alina. However, his mommy is none too impressed with his behavior recently, and joins in to show him the back of her hand. Before she can commit filicide, the Darkling smoke buddies kill her. The last thing she does is cut off his hand to break the connection, before she is Thanos snapped. I think Ben Barnes nails it in this scene, as he is able to express the complex emotions the Darkling is feeling, as well as the immense grief that comes with losing the only person who truly knew him. It also just adds to the very bad time the Darkling has been having this season. As we move to the climax of the season, we get what I like to refer to as the fight for the fold. The Nikolai side of things sees our boy shot down by some roided out Grisha. Nikolai is forced to embark on a marathon, as he tries to outrun his pursuers and make it back to safety. After losing a few slowpokes along the way, Nikolai is able to mount a defense. The whole sequence is genuinely exciting and feels desperate, especially when the fold starts moving and overtakes the fort. A couple of things don't work all that well though, like when Nikolai's friend dies. It's kind of like, who cares? I don't even know this guy. His defining characterization is Nikolai's friend.
Oh, friend!
Also, the pirate Grisha's death is something straight out of Looney Tunes, as a bomb is thrown at her feet, and instead of running away or kicking it back, she stands there and says, "Uh-oh." She might as well have pulled out a sign. We see Nikolai is not shy about killing, as he pretty coldly caps an unfingered goth girl. Nikolai and the crows charge into the fold to try and find Alina, but only manage to get trapped by a smoke monster. A smoke monster who skewers Nikolai. Hopefully nothing bad comes from that later. In the heart of the fold, Alina and Mal are ready to end it. Not wanting to kill Mal, Alina tries to destroy the fold by having Mal amplify her through touch. This feels like a good callback to the stag, as well as her hesitance to kill the sea whip. I think this might have worked had the Darkling not crashed the party. Alina and the Darkling both throw out the cut, and they ricochet off one another. The Darkling gets clipped, but Mal gets a near fatal blow. Knowing that Mal is bleeding out, and that the person who kills him will get the power boost, Alina reluctantly stabs him, light exploding from her. Now, not to get too nitpicky, but how does this exactly work? In the previous instances of the amplifiers, they need to have a piece of bone implanted in them before they got the power boost. And I don't even think Mal technically dies. Nina is trying to resuscitate him. She says,
He's putting up a good fight, this one.
I feel like that wording implies that he is still clinging on to life. We can also hear his heartbeat, so it kind of feels like Mal amplifying Alina here doesn't play by the rules that we know about amplifiers. It seems like Mal is going to be dead for good, and so Alina reaches into her bag of tricks and pulls out some Murzost. Throughout the season, Alina has been constantly mentioning using Murzost as a means of countering the Darkling.
If I made an army similar to his, only of light, then...
To create such a thing, you'd have to use Murzost. Foolish. Swear to me you'll never use it.
I think it's a good breadcrumb trail to get here, as Alina seemingly wants the power it would offer. I get the impression that if one of the people she suggested the idea to earlier hadn't immediately shut her down, then that is something that she would have pursued. And here, in a moment of desperation, I think it makes sense that she resorts to it. Also, a little amusing how she says she will never go down the same path as the Darkling, literally 2 seconds before taking the first step down that path.
I will never walk your path.
I will say that Mal surviving after essentially telling the audience that he needs to die for the fold to be destroyed feels a little cheap and rug pully. I didn't really care all that much about Mal dying, but if this is the way they were going to go, at least commit to it. It feels like they wanted the emotion of a self-sacrifice main character death, but they didn't want to have to go through with it. In my mind, the only way to justify this decision is to have the use of Murzost to revive him, change him in some meaningful way. However, he is seemingly pretty much the same. It is a little funny though, how he was all about how much he loved Alina and they were going to share their lives together, and then once he is revived, he's like, yeah, I kind of need some time for myself. The Darkling offers Alina a warning in his final moments. He tells her that she needs him, a yin to her yang, a dark to her light. Someone who can act as a sponge for the hatred of the world, in order to allow her to continue to be their hope. I think this was a very good final interaction, and feels like the Darkling's words may be prophetic. Alina is not interested though, and stabs him, killing the Darkling. At this point, I was a little confused. It almost feels like there's nowhere for the story to really go from here. The whole premise of the show was that the fold needed to be destroyed. This was the goal from the very beginning. And now, at the end of the second season, they've done it. They've done the thing. Not only that, but the big bad is dead. It feels like the story has reached its natural end. It almost seems like we reached the end of the show 2 seasons prematurely. On the Alina side of things, we don't have any pre-established villains or conflict to the point where it feels like whatever they have planned for future seasons will feel superfluous. Like add-ons for the sake of keeping the show going. It feels like the show knows this too, because the final episode is trying to convince the audience to tune in next season, as they hurriedly try to set up some new plot lines. Nikolai is going to be a smoke monster next season? You don't want to miss that.
Oh no, sorry if I made you an evil shadow demon by mistake.
Yeah, you have actually.
Alina is evil now? Or is she? Stay tuned.
You're the Darkling.
Oh, thank you.
There's a new super drug that massively amplifies your powers? The last one is the one I take largest umbrage with, as if this drug was available, they could have just found some for Alina to take instead of having her run all over the place looking for amplifiers. Overall, I think the Firebird arc was pretty good, but it was not without its shortcomings. It also felt like we burned through the material a little too fast, to the point where I am not all that certain of where the show goes from here.
It's a bit daunting, isn't it? Knowing where to go from here. We've had a singular focus for so long.
Season 2 of Shadow and Bone is a very mixed bag for me, as it had some high highs and some low lows. It failed to fully live up to the show's potential and is very disjointed. I think in the end it is slightly better than the first season, as I would probably rate it a low to mid 7. But unlike how after the first season I was excited to see what would come next, I now find myself relatively indifferent, as none of the new storylines they have set up in the finale really interest me very much. For what it is, it's a fun show, but I can't help but wish it was a bit better. It feels like it has all the ingredients for a fantastic fantasy show, but it only comes out okay. If you somehow made it to the end of the video, I want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, it would mean a lot if you liked and subscribed. It really helps the channel. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.